Hey guys, it's Marina with Artworthy Life, where I teach Christ-centered art journaling that gets you into God's Word every day. So if you haven't been on here before, we just go through every day trying to encourage ourselves to keep doing art and then using that art to direct us back into the Word of God. So I like to start every live with some scripture reading from the Word of God, and we are going to start off in Deuteronomy today. And I'm going to go ahead and show that on the screen so you guys can find that if you want to. But I just like to choose an encouraging Bible verse every day. And I want to read this one because, as you know, when I read scripture every day, I always say that's the best way to start your day, get you off on the right foot. And here's one of the encouragements God gave the Israelites back in the Old Testament, and why he says it's so important. So it's starting in Deuteronomy 11, verse 18. Therefore shall ye lay up these my words in your heart and in your soul, and bind them for a sign upon your hand, that they may be as frontlets between your eyes. And ye shall teach them to your children, speaking of them when thou sittest in thine house, and when thou walkest by the way, and when thou liest down, and when thou risest up. And thou shalt write them upon the doorposts of thine house, and upon thy gates, that your days may be multiplied, and the days of your children in the land which the Lord sware unto your fathers to give them, as the days of heaven upon the earth. And it does go on to say a little bit more about it, but the point is, God encourages us to have the Word of God, his words, in front of us constantly every day, and that's to be an encouragement to us and to keep us on the right path. So that's why we like to start with scripture every day, and I hope that's an encouragement to you. Today we're going to do some art journaling, as we always do every Friday. If you don't know, I'm live every Friday at 10:30 a.m. Pacific time, 12:30 Central, and 1:30 Eastern, and we do art journaling together. And today we're going to continue with a nautical theme that has actually gone from July into August, and we're continuing with that nautical theme. And I had a wonderful lady in our art journal club recently do a sea turtle, and I was really inspired by that. So I thought that is such a great creature to paint for this nautical theme that we're doing. And so she's been digging out all these great ideas, and I thought I would go ahead and piggyback her idea and do a sea turtle, a little bit different than she did. Hers is beautiful, but we're just going to do one that's simple, hopefully for you guys to follow along with. And what I did for this sea turtle is I actually made my own tracer. So I've made my own tracers a lot and shown you guys how to do that. There are videos on how to trace pictures off your screen or off of a picture that you have. But basically what I do is I take a piece of paper and I lay it over my computer screen, and I use a real gentle felt tip pen, and I trace out the screen, and that gives me the image that I'm wanting. So I wanted this kind of perspective of the sea turtle coming at you with his little fins, I guess, up, kind of like he's soaring through the water. And so that's the one I decided to trace. And I traced him already onto this scrap paper, and then I'm going to use carbon paper to transfer that onto my watercolor page. So if you haven't seen that already, go back and watch one of those replays. It's really simple. But basically that allows you to start with something instead of having to start completely from scratch when you're getting ready to draw. So that's always really nice. And I like to do that when you're starting off learning to draw, because sometimes you just can't see the perspective, and tracing is a great way to practice drawing. And eventually you can do it freehand. I've done a lot of stuff freehand since I started using tracers, but tracers is a great way to be able to do art every day and still have it come out wonderfully beautiful. And some people say this is cheating, and I say it's not cheating. Some of the best, most well-known artists in history, not only did they copy each other's work, but they used tracers. They would trace some of their other drawings and transfer them over, or trace, things that they had seen. So tracers are definitely legit art supplies. Okay, so I have a few different supplies I'm going to be using today. Here's a list of ones that I typically have on hand and what I will probably be grabbing today. But I just wanted to make sure you had a list there in case you're wondering what I'm using. and feel free to ask questions if you're not sure. So what I want to do first off is actually transfer this turtle onto this watercolor page. Now, what we often find is that when you're tracing, sometimes the page will slip around. So a lot of times I suggest that you like tape it down with some masking tape. But you know, I don't always follow the tips that even I give. So a lot of times I just hold it down, especially if I'm doing it quickly and actually like on a daily basis. So sometimes I just kind of lay the paper down, and then I'm going to put my carbon paper underneath here. If you don't have carbon or graphite paper, you can actually use your pencil and draw on the back of this paper and then trace it, and that will sometimes work. Usually it's a lot lighter than the graphite paper will transfer, but it still works. So that's a great option if you don't have any graphite paper. Okay, so I'm just going to trace out. So this was a real photo of a turtle, and I actually have a really cool picture of a turtle that I was swimming with in Hawaii a couple of years ago, and I looked for that one because I thought it'd be really cool to paint that one, and I couldn't find it. So we went with this generic picture of a turtle, but it's still really cute. One thing I am doing is tracing fairly lightly because I don't really want super dark, harsh lines, but I want the basic shapes down there. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And then definitely want the back of his little shell and this big fin up here. And then there was these scales kind of going up the fin. I don't know if they're really considered scales, but anyway, that I wanted to capture. So I did trace those on as well. Basically, anything that you think you might not want to have to draw freehand, go ahead and trace it in. It will help you a lot. So I'm going to go ahead and check and see if I have any comments coming through. Let's see. Do I see any comments? Oh, it looks like one just came through. Hey, Pam. Oh, yay. So do you see, Pam, I'm doing a turtle? Isn't that fun? Okay, so I'm going to trace that onto there like that. And I know sometimes our screens aren't dark enough to see. So I'm going to hold this up close so you guys can see that. Isn't that cute? Okay, and so now what I want to be doing is I want to create a fun background for this little turtle. So I'm going to get my size 16 round watercolor brush from Masters Touch, and I have my palettes. Where's my palette? There's my palette. Over here. Okay, and what I'm going to do is create an ocean looking background. And this is just going to be a mixture of a lot of different blues and things to fill in the background. So this blue is probably, whatever's left on my palette is probably a mixture of ultramarine, which I'm going to get a little bit more even here. Some ultramarine and azurite blue. That one has a little bit more teal in it. And I can start off with that and then come back and get some more blues if I need it. So I'm just going to sweep this all across the background of this painting. Oh, and another thing I'm going to do while I'm thinking about it is tape down the right side of the journal page. Can you make the page you're working on bigger? Yes, absolutely. Hey, Leslie Ann, how are you doing? So it doesn't make it any taller, but I can definitely do this number and move that over. Okay, and let me see if I can back my camera up just a touch for you guys. See if that helps. All right, let me know if that looks a little better on your end. And we'll see if that will, if that'll stay up. Okay, stay. Now it's sideways. It's like, I don't want to go. Okay, hang on, y'all. All right, there we go. Okay, we're going to wake it up somehow. Let me move this blue around just a bit so it doesn't dry while I'm trying to do my tape. So I like to tape down the right-hand side so that the page that's going to be tomorrow's journal page doesn't get damaged or painted. We can always kind of fade it in, but I'd rather not have to. So there's that taped off so that that doesn't cause any bleed through over there. Okay, now, okay, good. Hey, Jackie, I'm so glad you're on. So I'm just going to put a bunch of blue and green and all kinds of oceany colors around this little guy. And I like to go right up to the edge of his outline and then spread it out. I actually am kind of crossing over his little fin a little bit there, but that's okay. So I'm going to get a lot of blue to move across this page. So I kind of like bring the brush right up to the edge of him and then sweep it out that way. And normally I'd be leaving a little bit more white space, but I'm not too worried about that because he's going to be kind of the focus. So the background can be almost totally filled in for this page at least. You could also do a little masking tape border if you wanted to. That might make your page look a little bit more finished. I'm going to keep him as kind of the primary focal point though, so I'm not going to do that. I'm using a little bit darker blue right now because I want to make sure there's varying levels of depth and color around him. So I'm going to get a little darker blue and come up along the bottom of him. And around his face, I'm going to try to be a little bit more careful. I could switch to a smaller brush if I wanted to, but this one gets a pretty fine tip, even just using this big one. So I'm going to come up around his face and his fin here. And the goal is to just keep moving this paint so that you don't end up with tide lines, which are the really harsh edges when watercolor starts to dry before you really want it to. So, and we'll end up with a few that we have to blend in probably, but for the most part, we can avoid them by just kind of keeping everything moving while it's wet. If you just move the paint while it's still wet, it will not create those tide lines. Okay, I'm going to add a little bit of green. I'm grabbing my neon green and some of this blue and kind of mixing it together, and that's going to allow me to create a more turquoisey blue coming down into the bottom of here. So you can see I'm coming up to sweep that blue down, the blue that's already there. And then I'm just going to keep working it all the way down my page. Not really any rhyme or reason, just, you know, when you look at the ocean, there's so many layers of colors that you can just kind of go crazy with it and it'll still look great. So I'm going to add some real dark blue down here, and that'll kind of look like some under the water landscape happening down here at the bottom. Okay, I'm going to go all the way down, make sure that's all the way filled in, just like that. I'm going to kind of paint that in like that. Okay, so that's kind of what we're going for right there. And now I'm going to let that start to dry. And you'll see all these little cute, whoops, let me move that up. Maybe move the camera down just a touch. You can see all these cute little cloudy things happening because the paint is drying. And if you were trying to create a super smooth background, you would want to push that stuff around and keep it smooth. But because it's supposed to look like water and it's supposed to look kind of modeled like that, we're just going to leave it because that'll end up looking more natural in the long run. Okay, I'm going to clean my brush off. And what I'm going to do is actually set this aside and let it start to dry. And I'm going to do something I haven't done before. So we'll just kind of experiment with it as we go. But I wanted to take some scrap paper and create some texture with it. You can use this, you can do this with tissue paper, I'm sure. But I'm just going to use this printer paper and I'm going to wet it down a little bit with this big brush. And I'm going to use some of the blues that we were just using and just kind of put some color down on this page and basically create some scrap paper for myself. I'm going to grab a little bit of the neon green and kind of blend that in. What I'm wanting to do is create some paper I can use in a little while. So I want to use the colors that I was already using so that it's the same tone and everything, the same kind of look. And we'll see how it goes, if it works the way I want it to. And basically I'm just adding any kind of oceany color to this piece of paper. And it's not watercolor paper, so it's not going to blend as nicely as watercolor paper might do. But I'm just going to spread it all across here. And it is going to wrinkle up because it's not watercolor paper. And that's okay, because I'm actually not worried about it being flat, as you will see here in a little while. But I'm just going to spread this out enough that I can get a good amount of scrap paper across the page like that. And we're just going to keep spreading it out. And I think I'm going to just keep adding some of this neon blue and green. And that should give us some, different colors going on here. Here's some more darker blues. And I'm kind of trying to keep there from being too many brush strokes. On the regular watercolor paper, the brush strokes would smooth out. On here, it doesn't want to smooth out as easily. Okay, so that's about it for that. Just kind of give us some paper to work with here in a little while. And I'm going to clean this brush off again and set this aside and check to see if this is drying. So this is starting to dry. That looks great. And now we're going to work on our little turtle. So he is kind of a greenish color. Hey, Tammy, how are you? So he's kind of a greenish color, but he has a lot of yellow and mustard colors in him too. So if you're painting a creature that you have not painted before, I highly recommend you keep your reference photo handy, because you'd be surprised. You think, oh, well, okay, sea turtle, I'm thinking green. But there's a lot of color in this little guy. I'm going to grab this brush. This is my, yeah, I guess I'll use this one. So this is my Liquitex brush number 4, or size 4. And I'm actually going to start with like a tan color, because they have this interesting tannish mustardy color on the belly. And since he is mostly his belly right here, I'm just going to start with that. And the color I'm using is from my Komorebi watercolor set called Yellow Ochre. And yeah, I'm just going to start with that. I'm going to water it down quite a bit because I don't want him to like stark yellow. I always say stark, even though that's not really the word, is it? But anyway, so I'm going to put some of this yellow underneath here, and this will also start to define his shape a little bit. And I'm just eyeballing this basically based on the reference photo. And then he has some yellow kind of up under his chin here, and then under his little fin here. And this will help to show where his belly is, so he doesn't just look like a big blob. So that'll kind of help with that as well. And then he has his neck sort of starts to form right here and comes down. So see, here's his shell kind of on his back. And because we're using this tan color, I can kind of draw out where his neck is, and he won't get lost in the rest of him. Okay, and then I can use some of this yellow, and I'm just going to do some spots around his face, and those are going to get layered and have a little bit more color going on, but that'll get us started on his little face. And I don't want to go too detailed on this because this is a daily journal. It shouldn't be crazy complicated. I just like to do a little bit more for Fridays because it's fun and you guys get to see it live, but we're still going to keep this somewhat simple because he's a simple drawing. So we shouldn't be doing crazy stuff every day. We'll get overwhelmed and we won't be able to keep up with it. So That's one of the reasons I like to do a tracer, because that gets me started. I don't have to do a lot freehand, and it's just a good way to start. So there we go. We've got a lot of color down already using that tan color. So let me see if I have any comments. Hey, Tammy. Doing better than Wednesday. Doctor thinks I may have had a mini stroke Wednesday morning. Oh, goodness, girl. Got up with a terrible migraine and dizziness. She said a mixture of migraine and vertigo. Oh, yes. Well, we'll keep you in our prayers. Goodness, that's awful, Tammy. I'm sorry to hear that. Yeah, especially because you basically have been doing pretty well. Alrighty, so we're going to layer a little bit more color onto this little guy. And the way we're going to do that is with some green. We're going to start moving into the greens. And so I'm going to use a little mixture of the lemon yellow and a little bit of the blue that was left on my palette just because it's there. But that kind of lemon yellow is making a nice little green. And I'm just going to draw out some of the little scaly looking things that I'm seeing. Not really very particular, but just kind of like along the edges, there's some green I'm seeing, and a little bit of green under his arm right there and up into his face. There's a little bit of that neon looking green, and there's not very much of it, so I'm hardly using any. I'm going to do it down his little back there, kind of up over his arm, and under his chin here. So not a whole lot, just enough to give another layer of color. A lot of times watercolor is just like layering and doing another layer and doing another layer and waiting until it looks great. I am leaving some white space around because I want him to have those white spaces between his little scale things. Okay, now it's starting to dry. We're going to use, I think I'm going to switch to a round brush. This one is my, let's see, this one's called Royal Aquilon, and it's about like, I would say like a 2 size, although they're not consistent across brands, which is super frustrating. But anyway, you can see this size, about what that is. And I'm going to use a dark kind of, well, almost black, but like a bluish black. And I'm just going to move that over into the palette. And so this is some brown I have already on the palette. I'm mixing some blue into that. And so I'm getting this kind of deep, sort of stormy looking blue. And that, it's actually almost purple. I could add a little bit of purple to it if I'm looking at the picture of him. So I'm going to use that on the top of his fin here to show the edge of the fin, because it's actually quite dark there. And there are like these little scales that go down his fin. And this is why I say look at a reference photo, because you wouldn't think that you'd be using this color. I don't know, at least I wouldn't. I wouldn't think to use this color. But this is definitely the color that it shows, like a kind of a deep purple. And then it's going to come out all the way to the tip of his little flipper thingy. I don't know. Do you guys call that a flipper or a fin? I'm not sure. I'm sure there's a reason to call it one or the other, but I don't know. Okay, and then it kind of fades into the rest of the fin. And so I'm just going to kind of let it do that. And then his little shell on the back of him is this same color. And it comes down to about there. And then starts to fade out into the rest of his body. So I'm going to go ahead and kind of draw out some of the little blotchy shapes on his back. They're really sporadic and they're not very specific at all. So I'm just going to kind of paint them in like this. And then up over his back here. But look, this is just like blobs of color, you guys. It doesn't even have any rhyme or reason to it, but there's a creature appearing while we're painting. And I think that's the beauty of watercolors. It starts to look real even before you're really painting anything. So I'm painting in his eye right now because that's almost the same color. And then I'm going to use this same blue to do his little scaly spots all over his eyes. He's got some speckles here over the top of his face that come out into his nose. And then there's like almost like little giraffe spots all over his face here. So I'm going to paint those in like that. And they are like almost black. It's kind of amazing. I'm just going to kind of let them fill in like that. And what I mean by giraffe spots is none of them are a consistent size or shape, but they all sort of fit together like, yeah, like a little puzzle. And here's his little nose. His little nose is black only along the top edge. I guess it's a beak. It's like a hard beak. And then it fades down into the rest of his nose, into that tan color. So I'll just kind of try to mimic that. It actually, his nose comes up a little bit. Okay, there's his little face. And there's a little shadow under his lip here, so I'll just use this blue to create that shadow. And then down here on his other fin, same as this one over here, there's the same kind of spots. So I'm going to paint that one in, that dark black color. And then there are these little scale spot things that go up the fin like that. And they actually have a little bit of brown in them too, so I might come back and do some brown. And as I get up under his chin, I'm going to make sure the edges are nice and crisp so it shows the edge of his chin there. And a little bit under the neck like that. Okay, so there, and you can see how that's kind of creating a top of him and a bottom of him. It's really interesting. When my dad was in the military, he flew planes, and most planes, if you look at them, the top of them is black and the bottom is white. It has something to do with being able to be seen, or not seen. They probably don't want to be seen. And so actually, if you look at most sea creatures, they're kind of flying through the water, and they have a similar pattern. They have a similar structure. They're usually somewhat light on the bottom and kind of dark on top. So that's kind of neat. Okay, and then there are a few little shapes coming down like this. So I'll just kind of draw those in on the bottom of him, like that, coming down around. And then these break into these little scales even on the bottom as well. And so I'll just kind of outline some of those. They're kind of like pieced together little bits of skin and stuff, but we'll just use the brush to kind of draw the shapes. There's a little bit under his chin there. And this doesn't need to be dark like this, but since it's a drawing, I'm kind of taking some artistic license. And I'm going to draw in, he's got all these crazy little wrinkles on his neck right here, and little bumps that go under there, and then some scale type things going on his belly right there, all the way down to the tail. His other little fin. Okay, so he's not super detailed, but that's enough to kind of get his shape down. Let me make sure I'm not missing any comments. Okay, so there he is for now. And now I'm going to take this paper that we made earlier, and I'm going to move him over for just a second. Oops, move him over that way. And what I want to do is just have some fun making some extra texture on here. So I'm going to take this paper, just like you would tissue paper, and kind of crumple it up. Probably crumple it before I tear it. But kind of crumple this up and pull it back out, and you'll see it kind of creates that bumpy texture. And I want to actually layer this onto my page. So I have Mod Podge here, which is it's called a water-based sealer or glue or finish, and I have a really cheapy plastic kids paintbrush because I don't like to use a good brush because it's going to just get ruined by the glue. Plus the plastic bristles are easy to clean, and I'm just going to put some Mod Podge on the back of this paper. If you have a larger paintbrush, it'll help as well, but this lets me kind of control where it's going. I put quite a bit on the back of this page, and then I'm going to flip this over and just glue that down. And I'll use the brush to kind of push it down, and then use some Mod Podge over the top to glue down the edges as well. You want to get it nice and covered because you don't want that to start coming up. Okay, so I'm going to tear some more off of here. And we'll just kind of crumple these as I go. And this is a really fun, just an extra texture that you can add to your pages. I don't know, I like extra textures and things. And when you're doing something that's water like this, the layers, they look really cool. This is a little bit wet still, so it actually is kind of helping because it is making it nice and wrinkly and bumpy. So that's kind of cool. And also because I've used watercolor to paint this, they're gonna kind of bleed out into each other a little bit because of the Mod Podge reactivating that watercolor pigment. And that will just help everything look a little bit more watery. So I'm going to bunch this up even more. But I did want the background already painted because I didn't want to have to cover the whole thing if I ended up not having enough paper or whatever. So I'm going to crumple this up even more. And then just tear these into little pieces. And we're going to just let them be sporadic and random and layered. So I'm going to get a little bit more Mod Podge, put that down on the page, and let that stick. And now I'm starting to layer them a little bit, so you'll see those are overlapping. And if you see some of that white on the edges of the paper coming through, that's okay. It'll kind of look like sea foam or something like that. So just let that happen. And you can do as much or as little of this as you want. I just thought it would be fun to have an extra layer of texture, especially because I'm working on watercolor paper and it's quite durable. Normally on my other journals, I haven't been able to do this because the paper is not very strong and wouldn't be able to handle all of the Mod Podge. But because it is this thick, heavy watercolor paper from when I made my journal last week, it works out really well. If you missed the DIY art journaling episodes, I would recommend you go back and watch it. That's how we made this leather journal and how we made the little inserts that have really good paper. If you have trouble finding good journals or you go through your journals really fast and you need a way to have a good journal that you can just replace the inserts as soon as you need to, but I'm going to go shopping again, that's a great way to do it, is just to make your own. Okay, I'm going ahead and letting this paper come off the edge there, and then I'm just going to let it dry and then trim it later. So that's what that is going on there. And I'm going to do the same thing on this side. Just going to kind of let this, now see how I used the same colors that we used in the background of this watercolor page, so that when I layer these papers, it doesn't conflict with it. It's the same shades of color and all of that. Okay, I still have some paper over here to use, so I'm going to keep going with this. I'm going to come up underneath this little guy and do some paper right there. Okay. And I'm just going to kind of paint that up all the way up to the edge there. I'm being really generous with my Mod Podge because I don't really want to worry about the paper coming up at all. So I'm really layering that on thick. And do some over here as well. Like that. And you do want those layers because that'll make it look like it wasn't too perfect. You know, when you're going for random, you got to kind of create imperfection. So random is actually harder than pattern sometimes. So just kind of go with that. And don't be afraid of it looking not perfect. That's kind of the point. Okay, I'm going to take this paper and put it right up against that edge of the turtle again. All right. Now, while this is a little bit tacky, I'm actually going to add some glitter. I have some glitter from Hobby Lobby here, and it's just a fun, super fine glitter, and I've been really enjoying it. So I think I'm going to put some in my hand, do it the proper way. So I'm going to tap some out in my hand and then sprinkle it over this paper to create a sparkly surface like that. Since I have the Mod Podge down anyway, I might as well add even more fun stuff. So I'll do that, and then I have another color of glitter here that I can add even more on top of that. I'm going to take this one off. I had to tape these because the pop tops were wanting to come off, so I taped them. This is a little bit darker, same turquoise color though. I'll just add some to the edges, especially kind of darken up those edges and let that get all glittery. Look at that. So the glitter also kind of hides any imperfections your page might have. It's very forgiving. I'm going to kind of touch along the glitter just to make sure it's getting down into that page, especially where it's really thick. Okay, and I am going to add some more, but what I want to do now is add a little bit more to my turtle painting. He is, you know, the main focus, so I want him to be very well cared for. He's going to have lots of color going on. So let me just add a little bit more color to him. I have some red here on my palette. It's probably a little bit of carmine and a little bit of black and brown. But he has some interesting colors going on, so I'm going to use this red to kind of pull out some more variety of color in him. I'm going to add some of the red to his scales on the back, to his fin going up here, and then even to his eye, and kind of under his eye, and then in those spots on his face. Just adding a color that you wouldn't expect can kind of make your eye it can make your eye say, oh, that's more believable. If he's just a couple of colors, he'll look sort of flat and not very interesting. So we want our turtle to be interesting. I'm adding a little bit of that to, well, and he does have these like reddish colors down here through his belly area. I'm going to do this up under his chin as well. And then down through those scales at the bottom. Kind of up along the edges as well. And then we can have a little bit along this fin. Fading out into the rest of the fin there. Yeah. I'm going to put a little up under his lip there. I'm adding a little bit more even than the reference photo shows, but I'm really liking the contrast of color against the blue, so I think it works really well. Pulls out all those oranges and reds as well. So I think that really helps make him stand out a little bit better. Okay, and I'm just going to kind of use some water to brush the color around. Do want these scales to pop out a little bit more. Okay, that should work. We'll do a little bit more on this fin over here. All right, that's looking pretty good. I think that's good for adding some color to him. He looks a lot richer. He has a lot more layers of color going on, so that looks better. And now I'm going to put a little bit more of this paper on the top edge. How about a Google eye, Tammy says, to make the turtle pop off the page? What do you think? I think that would be really cute if you wanted to do that. I don't usually use Google eyes on a painting I've already done because it might make him look less realistic when he's looking pretty realistic right now. But it would be really cute if you, especially if you were doing a more cartoon version of a turtle, that would definitely make him pop off the page. That's a cute idea. I like that. Okay, you'll have to tell me if you do a googly-eyed turtle. That would be so cute. I'd love to see him. All right, I'm adding another little layer of paper over here and just kind of using up the rest of the paper to go up this edge all the way up. And I used to really not like glitter. I guess I had seen it used badly, used kind of poorly, enough that I was just kind of opposed to it in general. But I've found if you're going to add glitter to a piece of art or your journal or whatever, try to find glitter that is really fine. That tends to make your glitter look a little bit more classy, I guess is the word. And it's much finer. It looks more like an embellishment rather than just kind of plastic sequins sitting on top of your page. So just look for a nice fine glitter. And there's some by Martha Stewart that's incredibly small, and there's also some that Hobby Lobby has. Just look for the really fine, like a powder type glitter, and that works best, for me at least. That's what I like the look of. Okay, I have a little bit more paper here, and you can see it didn't really take very much, especially when you're tearing it into little pieces like this. So just kind of layering that on. And I'm doing it very randomly, but trying to cover everything. So, you know, there's a balance. And this little brush works really well because when I'm done, I won't have to, well, number one, I will not have ruined one of my great brushes that has nice hair bristles or whatever. But also, because it's plastic, like I said, the glue will wash right out of the bristles. And so I keep 2 of these on hand so that I can use them for glue or masking fluid or Mod Podge. So it works really well. One thing I am being careful of is I'm trying not to paint over the turtle right now. Mod Podge can be liquidy enough to reactivate watercolor. So I don't want to accidentally reactivate it before I'm ready to like kind of control how much goes down at once. And when I do go over it with Mod Podge, I will be very careful You could also spray it. I've also sprayed watercolor before, but even that can reactivate it. And it just depends on the paper that you've painted on and how solid your watercolor's on there. So just be really careful not to smudge your painting. A little bit more. Come up along this little arm. And this is definitely mixed media. So if you've ever heard that term mixed media, basically you're not using one art medium like just watercolor. We're using Mod Podge and regular paper and watercolor paper. And later when this page is finished, I'll be using glue. We're using glitter, all kinds of layers of things. So this is a good example of mixed media art. Okay, I'm going to add some glitter, speaking of, so that we can make this top area match the bottom. So I'm going to sprinkle that on. I like to pour it in my hand and then put it on like you would salt or something, because you don't want to over salt your sea. Okay, I have some light glitter again here. Oops. Light colored glitter. I love using all of these teal blues. You guys know anything in the teal blue range is like my favorite. So doing the glitter like this is really fun. And using all this blue is just really, really fun. Okay, so I'm gonna kind of just dust off whatever's left there. And I'm gonna use my blow dryer to go ahead and dry this really well. And that way we can pick up with the next step before we're done on live. Alrighty, so I'm gonna mute this really fast so it doesn't blast anybody out. Alrighty, let's see. I saw a couple comments come in. Yes, Pam, the sequins that I sent you, they would probably work for adding. I think they'd give it a totally different look. So, like, if I was going to use those, I'd probably use them as like a feature rather than an embellishment. Like the first thing I can think of is that little book that has the fish in it, where it has the beautiful gorgeous shells. So you could like choose a fish shape that you want and fill the whole thing with those sequins or something like that. That's what I would do, or use them as my bullet points. That would be kind of fun. But because they're so big, I would probably use them more like a feature. And then Jackie says that at the dollar store, she picked up a small 4x2.5-inch tin box that has on the top, "Give it to God." I think I've seen those before, and they come in a couple of different colors. Really fun. Good tip. So you guys rush dollar store and go pick those up. That sounds fun. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and trim these little edges off here. So just gonna run my, actually it's easier to do it this way, to open it to the other side. I'm just gonna trim off whatever's sticking out from this other side. Whoops, this will come down this way. And just trim them up flush with the edge of the journal. I like going off the edge like that because then it looks like you made the page like that before you ever even put it in. That just really looks cool. Okay, and then I'll go to this side. All right, so there's that side. And I am going to go back and Mod Podge over the top of this guy very carefully. So I'm just going to get my brush nice and wet, and the key to this is I'm going to do it quickly and try not to push the Mod Podge around too much, because if I do, I could reactivate those watercolors and smear my painting. So I'm just going to kind of blob it all on there and blob it on thick and let it dry like that. This paper is really thick and nice, so it's absorbed the color really well. So as long as I don't really scrub it, it's not going to come up. But if you have a less expensive watercolor paper, you may not want to do that. It could lift. Okay, and then I'm just going to kind of brush out the edges. The reason I'm going over the turtle is because the rest of the page right now is slightly shiny. I am using matte Mod Podge, but even the matte Mod Podge is glossier than dry watercolor paper. So I don't want my turtle to be the only thing that's like dry. You know, I want him to be somewhat glossy as well if the rest of the painting is going to be glossy. All right. And that is all I have for today. This is a art journal, so I am going to come back with some wordage, but I'm not going to do that on live. I will do that and then post it later so you guys can see. But that is all I have for today. Let's see. Since I didn't have blue, I was thinking if there was a way to do this. Yeah, Pam, I wonder what color glitter that you have. If you could like share what kind of color glitter you have, it might work. But those sequins would be really pretty. They might just be so big that they look more like less like embellishment and more like they're a feature in the painting. So you could do them strategically, and I think it would still be really pretty. One thing I did do, if you'll notice, is I put the glitter down while I only had Mod Podge on the blue. And then I dried that all, and then I put Mod Podge on my turtle. The reason is because I didn't want to put Mod Podge on the turtle and then accidentally get glitter on the turtle. It wouldn't have killed it if I made him a little glittery, but I don't really want blue turquoise glitter on my turtle. So that's why I did it in that layer. This is going to have to dry, so that's why it's still kind of white from the Mod Podge. But as soon as it's dry, I'm going to do my journaling, and I will post a picture with that totally finished. But that is all I have for you guys live today. And this is a really, really fun page. So if you decide to do this like crumpled up paper texture all around here, I'd love to see what it looks like. So post it to your page and tag Artworthy Life so we can all get inspired by your ideas. And in the meantime, God bless all of you guys. And I will see you next week live at 10:30 Pacific time here at Artworthy Life for some more art journaling. Take care. God bless you and have a wonderful